I am Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. He's the author of several books, no other than Mr. Richard Eyre.
How are you, Daniel?
I'm good, and you?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay.
Can you please introduce yourself, Mr. Richard?
Yes, hi. Yeah, I'm Richard Eyre, and I dabble in writing from time to time. I've written a few books, um, and just got. Well, I thought we would. We've just been talking. We'll talk a little bit today about one of my favorite authors, who is Bernard Cornwell.
Oh, sounds interesting. So, is it Bernard Cornwell is one of your influence?
I think he probably is. Yeah, I think certainly. I think when I decided to write Shadow of the Knife, i.e., a story set in the past. I think it was Bernard Cornwell as well, along with another writer called Stephen Saylor, who wrote some books. But we can talk about Stephen Saylor another time if you fancy.
Bernard Cornwell is an English writer.
He is, yes. I'm not sure where. I think he lives in America now, or he did. The last time I sort of read any information about him. I think he's married to an American. And he has written several books, actually, but he's most famous, I suppose, for the Richard Sharpe series of historical adventures, as well as the Last Kingdom books. And those two are two of my favorite series of books.
Wow. So, what are the characteristics of Mr. Bernard Cornwell that you like best in terms of writing?
You know what? I think that just that sort of. I think when I've been talking to you before, I've told you that. Well, I think when we were talking about my novel Point of Contact, I said that one of the influences that I liked was Alistair MacLean and Desmond Bagley and writers like that. Thriller writers. And there's a sort of a formula to their books. The stories might be different, but there is a sort of an arc that goes through their books. And I think that's what I like about Bernard Cornwell's writing. It's the characterization as well. The character of, let's talk about, say, Richard Sharpe, who is, so the Sharpe books, for anybody who doesn't know, I mean, they're quite famous now because there was a TV series starring Sean Bean as Richard Sharpe. And they're set in the Napoleonic Wars. So they're set in the early, well, basically the books go from 1799 all the way up to about 1820 or something like that. But most of the books are set in Portugal and Spain, where Richard Sharpe is a man. He's born into the gutter. He's an absolute. His mother is a prostitute. He's absolutely the lowest of the low, and like a lot of people, he takes the king's shilling and he becomes a soldier. But unlike others in the Sharpe books, he gets a battlefield commission, and he moves away from being a sergeant and he becomes an ensign. And a lot of the books have this, because he rises through the ranks because he is such an excellent soldier. By the end of the books, he's a lieutenant colonel. And a lot of it is the tensions between the upper class officers who he has to sort of mingle with, and him feeling out of place. I think Richard Sharpe never ever feels like he belongs in that officer class, and he's only there because he's such a good soldier.
Yes. So do you think, Mr. Richard, they grasp all the story the same as the book when they put in a TV series?
The TV series is different, and it's strange because unlike the Last Kingdom books, which we can talk about in a minute, the Richard Sharpe books, I got into them because I came across the TV series. I didn't know anything about the novels. And so I came across it. The first one was Sharpe's Rifles, because Richard Sharpe is in the rifle battalion. Most of the soldiers in the army at the time have muskets, but the rifles, they're like the marksmen, the sharpshooters, the skirmishers in between the red and they wear green instead of red. I suppose they were the beginnings of a sort of a modern army. But I came across this series and I loved it, and I loved watching it. And then I thought, I'm going to read these books. And so for a good few years, I would make a trip, maybe once every couple of months, to a little bookshop that I used to love going to, which unfortunately isn't there now, in a town called Morbith, which was only about 5 miles away from where I used to live. And I would go and buy them in chronological order, because they are chronological. But when he first started writing them, he wrote them. They weren't always in chronological order, but later on, and I think because of the TV show had done so well, he began to write other novels and sort of dropping them into the time periods, but I think they're mostly the same. The episodes, each episode was about 2 hours, so it was like a little mini film. And so they were able to really sort of get into the books, unlike most TV series that come from books, because there's so many books now that they were able to do it justice. Most of them, I think, did the books justice. And it's strange because in the books, when he started writing the books, Richard Sharpe is from London. He's from what were called the rookeries in London, a sort of these little workhouses, these workhouses where orphans would have to unpick oakum. It was called picking oakum, which was pulling the old tarred ropes to pieces to get to the fibers. And he's, like I say, he's properly dragged up. But Sean Bean played him, and obviously Sean Bean played him in his usual Yorkshire accent. And so as the books went on, Bernard Cornwell began dropping in little hints that Richard Sharpe had moved from London and had lived in Yorkshire for a while. And I think it was just because Richard Sharpe had made the character his own, Sean Bean had made the character his own.
So do you think, Mr. Richard, what is the trademark of Bernard Cornwell in terms of writing?
I think they're just yarns. They're very much, as I was saying, they're very much in the vein of a Desmond Bagley or an Alistair MacLean. They usually start, and the Last Kingdom books are the same. The Last Kingdom books is another series of books, which again they've turned into a series. It ended up on Netflix. But that's set in Saxon England. But basically, for both Uhtred, who was the main character in the Warlord books, I think they're called, or the Saxon Chronicles, or whatever they're called, and Richard Sharpe, it'll start with something goes wrong for them, So Richard Sharpe will be doing something, and then he'll get accused of being a spy or something, or he's going to get flogged or something like that. He'll fight his way out of it, or he'll do something, or somebody will really do something really bad to him, and he'll be at his lowest. There will be, usually at the end of the books, there was a major battle, which he would once again prove his sort of daring do. And then he would, 9 times out of 10, he'd probably find a woman who he had to save and who'd fall in love with him. And he would get rid of the upper class, person who was trying to do him wrong. So they're sort of very formulaic, if you like, but they're just so well written and so well researched that they're just fun to read, and you just become. I became a little bit obsessed, especially with Sharpe, I think. And now in my room, I've still got a load of the paperbacks that I read and that I bought at that little shop in Morpeth. Still got a lot of them. I haven't got all of them. I did at one point have all of them, but I tend to any ones I buy now, I tend to just get on Kindle anyway now. But yeah, there's it's just quite, they're comforting, you know.
Yes.
They're comforting because basically he's going to come out on top at the end. But what's he going to go through? What's he going to have to go through before he comes out on top?
What are your books that, let's say, Mr. Bernard Cornwell, influence you the most?
I think both the Sharpe books and the books about Uhtred influenced me, and I think in a funny sort of way the Uhtred books especially influenced a little bit Minstrels, but the Prophecy trilogy, because what happens in the books is he gets older, obviously, the Richard Sharpe books are in a sort of a 20-year time frame, but the Saxon books, they start when Uhtred is just 10, and the thing about him is he is a Saxon. And another great thing about Uhtred is that he is the son of the Earl of Bebbanburg, which is a place called Bamborough, which has a castle, and it's about, it's about 20 miles away from where I live. And at one point, it used to be the seat of the kings of Bernicia, which sort of morphed into the earldom of Northumbria later on. And I think Bernard Cornwell said he was directly related to a character who lived at Bamborough and was called Uhtred the Torchbearer. And so he's created this character, Uhtred of Bebbanburg, sort of based on that, but not really. He's got the same name, but he's living a little bit earlier and things like that. But yeah, and I think because, like I say, it starts when he's 10. The last book, Uhtred, he's clocking up 80. He's nearly 80 years old, and it basically is telling his life story. And I think that gave me the courage to have Sturgis get older in the Prophecy trilogy books, because he's like 29, 30 in the first book, but in the last book he's a 60-year-old man. And I don't think I would have had the courage to do that without reading the this idea that, yeah, all right, 60, you're knocking on a bit, especially in the 10th century. But I thought, no, that's okay. I think a 60-year-old can be the hero of a book. That's certainly one of them. And I think both of those, the idea that Cornwell has for his books, he's not scared of changing history slightly. He always has a little author's note at the end about what is real and what's not. And I'm sure in the Sharpe books, he actually moved the date of some quite famous battles just to allow Sharpe to be in both of them in one book, And again, I think that influenced my writing in Shadow of the Knife, to have a novel set in a certain time, but to be able to have the freedom to knock it around a bit, not have to, it's not like they're historical novels. They're not novels about real people, although real people are in them, such as the Duke of Wellington's in quite a lot of the Sharpe books. And King Alfred is in a lot of the early Uhtred books. But just to have the freedom to be able to write a rollicking adventure story in the past, but be able to sort of, suspend disbelief a little bit. I think that's what it's all about.
Yes, indeed. So let's do the recap of your Prophecy trilogy, because it's been a long time.
Okay. Well, the Prophecy trilogy, as I've said, the 3 books are set over 30 years of this guy, a guy called Phil Sturgis, who was when we first meet him in 1988, he's a reporter for a rock music magazine, and he's a young man, and he's loving his life, and he's living with his girlfriend. He's absolutely adores her, and he's got his best mate Toby, and he's a photographer for the magazine, and they're just living a life. They're just two young men, and they're really having a good time. And then Phil Sturgis comes across a new band called Minstrel's Bargain, and there is something about the lead singer that doesn't sit right with Phil, and he starts to see there's an old tramp following him around, and he doesn't know who this guy is, but he puts the fear of God into Sturgis, and he doesn't understand why. He doesn't understand why this old man is so terrifying to him. And at the same time, we see that the music of Minstrel's Bargain is doing something to people, and they're starting to kill themselves and kill other people in the most horrific ways. And without spoiling it too much, I suppose the crux of the story is the tramp is there to give Phil a message that he is needed. He is he has been chosen to be the traveller, and that there have been many travellers over the centuries, and they have all tried to fight a demon called Minstrel, and it is Minstrel who is causing all of the horror that's going on. And so in the first book, we see Phil go from a happy-go-lucky sort of guy into, first of all, total disbelief, then rejection of the tramp and what he asks him to do. He says, no, I'm not going to do that. That's ridiculous. But then finally, of course, he has to pick up the mantle of being the traveller, and he has to try and defeat Minstrel. And that's where the first book ends. It ends with Phil believing he has defeated Minstrel. And then the tramp basically makes him forget everything about it, because what the idea behind that is that if Phil has been living in this world, that the tramp has been sort of protecting him, and if he realized the reality of what he's seen and what he's done, it would drive him mad. So the tramp basically wipes his memory. And then the second book, that's 10 years later, and Sturgis is getting on with his life, and he's not in a good place. He's just turned 40 by that point. He's got a couple of kids with his girlfriend, who's now his wife, but he's not. This is now set in 1999, and he's not in love with the music anymore. He actually now part owns the rock magazine, but it's not going well because the music's changed. Nobody's really listening to rock music anymore, and he's had enough, and he doesn't even like the new bands, and he's also gone through a bit of a midlife crisis. He thinks his wife might be having an affair, but he can't prove anything, and he's sort of a bit down. But the tramp reappears and explains. I mean, of course, with the tramp's appearance, all of his memories then come back, and he realizes what went on 10 years ago. And the tramp tells him that this prophecy is beginning to come true. And the prophecy is something that in the world that the tramp lives in is just a tale. It's just a story of a child who will be born, who will defeat all evil and get rid of evil. And he says that the child has been born. And so Sturgis and the tramp sort of become the protector for this young woman who is pregnant, and her child is going to be, it's going to save sort of humanity. However, the Minstrel is back, because the devil has sent Minstrel out to get this child's soul and to kill this child, and therefore the devil will reign supreme. So there's a bit of a battle that goes on. There's a battle in it. The second book ends up at a concert in Newcastle, at the arena in Newcastle, and there's all sorts of violent stuff going on. And the Minstrel in that book he's walking a bit of a sword edge, because he's trying, without telling the devil. He's trying to double cross the devil because he wants to take over the devil's job. And he's got a plan of his own with this baby that will be born, what he wants to do with it. Anyway, at the end of all of that, he makes a bargain with Phil, and the bargain is that he will go away as long as Phil doesn't sort of dob him into the devil sort of thing. And that's what happens. And Sturgis hasn't got much choice, so that's then. Third book, we've gone another 20 years, and as I've just been saying, Phil is a 60-year-old man now. He's part retired. The rock magazine has now morphed into a sort of a digital radio station that he runs, look like classic rock station. He's living the dream. He's absolutely fine. He's got his children are grown up. His son is a bit disappointing. He seems a bit lazy. Seems a bit feckless. He doesn't know what he wants. But apart from that, he's doing fine. But it's a very convoluted reason. He gets dragged back into this world once again. And the baby has now grown up, 20 years old, but so has Minstrel. Minstrel took over the body of a baby who died, and has now the body that he is in is 20 years old, and he becomes a rock star again. And anyway, so they have to, and that one goes all over. They end up in Wales. They're running across the moors in Wales. And they end up at a sort of a Glastonbury type festival where it all comes to a crashing end, and a bit of a poignant and sad end in a way. But evil does not triumph. That's the main thing, and that's the prophecy books in a nutshell, really. So it's 30 years of this guy fighting a demon. Yeah, you can read them for free if you're in Unlimited, Kindle Unlimited. That's KU, isn't it?
Yes.
So if you've got KU, you can read them for free.
Yeah, the Prophecy Trilogy are Minstrel's Bargain, Minstrel Renaissance, and Minstrel Requiem. Before we go on, Mr. Richard, I want to shout out to the people listening to my ranking on the last 30 days according to my analytics. At Cameroon, I'm number 5. Algeria at number 9. Jordan at number 17 on Apple chart. Canada at 111. Georgia at 119. Hong Kong at 142. Mexico at 159. Uganda at 221. And Oman at 240. And thank you so much for supporting this podcast, because this podcast is created to empower writers all over the world, like Mr. Richard Eyre. Richard, can you please invite our listeners to buy all your books?
Yes, please. They're all on Kindle Unlimited. The prophecy books are self-published, really, but most of my other books are you can get them through Burning Chair websites. That's the name of the publishers, but they're on Amazon and most, as Daniel has said, most leading places where you can buy books on either Kindle or in paperback.
Yes, in Canada you can buy those minstrels, the Prophecy Trilogy, Coal, Indigo, and Chapters. So try them,
Lovely.
people, because one of a kind. Okay, Mr. Richard, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Danielle. You take care. Thank you.
Modicon people, see you soon.